Our hymn of invitation is 354. I'm thinking of changing that because all of you are already saved. I don't know what I'm inviting you to. Perhaps I'm inviting you to the coffee hour, because I got to tell you, gentlemen, I don't know how in the world any of you grew diametrically unopposed. I found out that term is from a fellow up in Michigan who is, he says he's diametrically unopposed because his middle has spread without his belt doing any help to keep it from spreading. But he's diametrically unopposed. So, gentlemen, I don't know how you did it, because some of the stories from your ladies who were at that time new brides, I wouldn't have given you a plugged nickel for any of them learning how to cook. But look at what has happened, and look how we have enjoyed their early mistakes. And then I think Rowena told the one about the bride, the southern gal who married the feller from Indiana and was going to fix him one of his favorite meals, and said what kind of vegetable he wanted. He said he wanted macaroni and cheese. She said, what kind of a nut eats macaroni and cheese as a vegetable? So she said, well, he wanted it, I'll fix it. Threw the macaroni in a pan, put cheese on top of it, stuck it in the oven, and baked it for 30 minutes, and said, who would like this stuff? Oh, I tell you, some of the stories, they were wonderful. And all of the chicken stories and everything else. Carolyn, you did a wonderful, wonderful job. And all of you ladies did a wonderful job. I wish I'd been there for the first hour. Oh, gosh. That, Luke, the 9th chapter, and the 28th verses. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James. Now, Peter, John, and James, you know, are our favorite disciples. They are the ones who are the first disciples called. I don't know where Andrew is in this picture, but those 4 disciples were the very first 4 disciples ever called by Jesus to come and be disciples. And they were all fishermen, all friends, and they came off their boats and left all of their families behind in order to come and follow Jesus. Peter has, just a day or so before, also confessed the good confession, that thou art Jesus, the Son of the living God. And Jesus has said, flesh and blood has not given this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. So Jesus is only taking these disciples with him to the mountain. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw 2 men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. When the voice had spoken, Jesus found himself alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things that they had seen. Think how amazing this moment, this blessed moment that God blesses the Word and blesses us to hear it. Think how amazing that moment could have been for any one of us. This kind of thin moment in time when God comes down from heaven and enters into our reality and our time-space dimension. Think how amazing this moment could have been for Peter and James and John. Just think about it. Think about that Son of the living God being lifted up, his face and his garments just as white as snow. What a moment to recognize their inclusion in this moment when Jesus is lifted up and put between who? Moses, the sign of the law on one side, and Elijah, the sign of the prophets. Here are brought together in Jesus, the Son of God, who is born on earth in order to remind us of the magnificent amount of love that God has for us. So these two moments in time, these two people in time, this moment, Moses, who brought the law, but which actually brought a nation out of a nomadic people, gave them a set of laws and civilized them so that they became the nation of Israel, gave them the promise that their seed, that Moses and Abraham and Jacob and all of their seed would continue on through eternity until God decided to end that day. Can you imagine yourself being in this thin moment in time and to see and to have that opportunity to see and to feel? What a moment that would be. But the temptation to Peter and to James and John was just too much. The temptation was just too much. What did they want to do? They wanted to build buildings. We want to build 3 tabernacles here. One for Moses, one for Jesus, one for Elijah. And what God tells them in that cloud is that this is my son, in whom I am well pleased, reminding them of the time during Jesus' baptism and during the time in Psalms when those words were foretold. The 3 tabernacles would have divided once again the religious world. And what God was trying to get them to see is that the religious world, as far as they knew it, was coming together into one place. And our problems as human beings is that we want to recognize the heroes amongst us. We want to lift up those who are providing clarity for our lives and giving us something more than what we really understand that we have in ourselves. And here is God revealing God's self in the presence of the community of Christ. Not Christians, because Christians hadn't even been thought of yet. But here, Moses and Elijah are brought together under Christ. In other words, all authority in heaven and on earth. The law and the prophets, the law and the Spirit. All of these things are being put under Jesus Christ in this transfiguration. It's God revealing God's self and making clear that the strength for the believers in their faith for the coming of days was going to be present for them all the way through their journey. Because remember what the Scripture said. Jesus had just made known of his departure. Another way of saying Jesus had made known to the disciples that he was going to be killed in Jerusalem. They just put it in nice terms, that his departure. And they were going to need this kind of concern and this kind of comfort and this kind of encouragement from God to get through those next days. And don't we all need that for our age and for the coming of the days that we have coming? Don't we all need, because all of us are going to get sick, we're all of us going to have injuries, we're all of us going to need more medication,